Enlightenment is this. It is your own awareness. Noticing, seeing this. There are many objects, many things to see, but the awareness itself is not mixed up in those objects. There is always a certain deeper place of seeing, even in the midst of confusion, doubts, and worries. One has a certain awareness that one is worried. So that awareness is the source itself. Some of the key questions is, how do we get to enlightenment? And there are three key parts. One is deconditioning. Deconditioning the mind, and especially the mechanical parts of the mind, which are habits. The habitual way of thinking, the habitual patterns, the habitual way of responding to situations, people, environment. So the conditioned mind is like a mechanical clock. It is all interconnected and interwound in many layers, a bit like an onion. It is layered upon layer upon layer, and they're all connected. Sometimes I give an example of spaghetti, that the mind is like spaghetti. And when you take one noodle out, it becomes slightly more loose. And then you take another noodle out, it becomes more loose. And when you take more noodles out, it becomes quite transparent. You can already see through it. So the deconditioning is allowing consciousness to come through. And we don't need to decondition, so to speak, to solve all the issues, to come to full consciousness. Some assume that all my problems will be solved. That would take quite a long time and way more, a lot of work. However, for consciousness to shine through and want to recognize oneself as consciousness, in other words, awareness, we take a highway approach by deconditioning the key points which are blocking consciousness. And by finding and addressing those key points, we can work through them easier, and we can open up consciousness a lot quicker. The second part of the three parts of enlightenment is disidentification. At the most lowest state of consciousness, one is identified with constantly being angry and always thinking he or she is right, everybody is wrong, and so on. This is a very low state of consciousness. On a bit of higher state of consciousness, people are identified with their bodies. I am the body, you're the body. There are two bodies. Let's see what we can do together. Or let's have a bit of masculine time, punch each other, to see who is stronger, and so on. So so that's the body identity. People are exploring their bodies. And then there is a mental identity, or but mental in terms of knowledge, what I know. So identified with what I know. It is still external, so to speak. It's accumulated knowledge and identified with that. And once we clear that out, then a person comes to recognize that maybe I'm the knower and not what I know. And then opens up the possibility of self-realization, going into yourself and realizing more and more fundamentally who you are, and importantly, who you are not. So disidentification is the second major part. However, a common pitfall in the second step is that a person would sit and ask, who I am, and I am this, I am that, I'm not this, I'm not that. But it's a mental exercise or a meditative exercise. But people get stuck because you need to do, you see, all three things in synchronicity, in combination. You can't just do one thing and expect that everything is going to happen for you. Just like you can't continue, healing and de-patterning, because you're going to be stuck. You can only do as much at certain level or layer. We need to see consciousness as a multi-layered approach, because, as I mentioned, there are many layers of the mind, layers of identity, layers of stuck points. Yeah, so if you're constantly just healing, you may be circling around and around. If you only inquire, you're also going to get stuck in that too. When you join these two together, you can move a bit, more flexibly up. And the third most important part is familiarization with a higher state of consciousness. To get familiar with a higher state of consciousness, and especially in the company of that individual, commonly called teacher or guru or guide, whoever is already there, who can help one out and show that, okay, this is the next step, this is how it feels, let's get to know it. Why this is necessary? Because the mind doesn't know it. The mind, it doesn't know it. It has never experienced it. So how can it be familiar with something that it doesn't know about it? And on the other hand, people, do read a lot of books, and then they start making all sorts of assumptions to try to familiarize. But, the book text and so on, it's not going to get you far. It has limitations comparing to the actual experience. So a teacher or a guide will always help one to familiarize with the most optimal place that a student, a person can ascend, so to speak, or open up to easily. If the teacher is not so experienced, they might say, there's nothing, it's not like this, it's not like that, and the student just gets confused. They say, I don't know what to do now, and the teacher says, there's nothing to do about it. and the student just says, I'm lost, there's nothing I can do about it. So a teacher who truly sees another person will know that this place is the next place, this is doable, we can get you there. Because if you know, if I would speak from my own place only, nobody would understand me, you know, because there's nothing to say. It's just openness. It's just now, but you know, but for people, it's not so practical because they're not familiar with that. So therefore, when we combine these three things together, deconditioning, you know, removing those unuseful habits that are no longer serving you, and especially the ones that are blocking the consciousness. That's number one. Number two, disidentifying from that which is not serving you again, and it's not in your power. So identifying with that which is of a higher place as a next step, which is more open, more real, more true, more natural, and importantly, closer, because if we say, oh, I'm from, you know, another planet, I'm from Pleiades, you know, it doesn't really bring you any closer to your own self. It makes you more homesick or more longing or more desperate for something which is not right here, actually. So in the process of disidentification, we disidentify from that which is not real and not serving you, and we come closer to yourself, more fundamentally yourself. That's why it's called true self, yes, or the real self, or it's called the self. Because guess what it is? It's not somebody else. It is the self, you. Yeah. And the third step is very, very important, to familiarize, because the mind doesn't know it. So familiarization with the higher level of consciousness is essential. And in that process, of course, via, so to speak, the teacher envelops a student in this higher field and allows one to experience that directly, to familiarize, to get to know it, because your cells need to feel it, need to recognize it. Some say remember, but I would rather use the word recognize. Recognize. So, and then of course there are transmissions, which are highway, to familiarize, decondition, and essentially disidentify, because the transmission does not support a false identity, and it enhances and supports the natural self.